Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for making it out here. My name is Alex Thompson. I'm a national political correspondent at Axios. We're just so glad that you could all be here for day one of the DNC at Axios House. If you're on socials, they gave me the hashtags I knew I'd forget. Be sure to use the hashtag AxiosHouse when posting and head to axios.com/Chicago to check out our live blog for the latest local and convention updates. So we're excited to dive in tonight. Tonight's event is around winning the working class. This is actually part one of a two-part conversation, and we'll host additional conversations tomorrow morning with Representative Jim Clyburn and Senator Gary Peters. You're not going to want to miss either of those. So without further ado, welcoming our first guest to the Axios stage, Florida Congressman Maxwell Frost. Thanks so much for being here.
Of course, it's great to be here.
Okay, so we're going to start with actually a political question. Mm-hmm. So it's November 6th. Election days happened. Kamala Harris wins. What's the one reason why?
Because she showed the country exactly what government can do for them. I really believe part of the reason why 50% of this country doesn't vote is people fundamentally believe that their vote doesn't count towards anything. Not just doesn't matter in terms of the person being elected, but a lot of people feel like they don't see tangible things come after it. And I think, she has an opportunity, obviously she was a part of this amazing agenda and this amazing record with President Biden and played a lead role in that. But she also has the opportunity to distinguish herself outside of that as well. So she's a very interesting role to play over the next 2 months. But I think that's why she wins.
Okay, and Election Day happens and Donald Trump wins. What's the one reason why?
Well, that won't happen. But if it did, I think it'd be because we took this excitement for granted. And that's really been my message to everybody as I've been talking on the breakfasts this morning, as I'm traveling the country and speaking with people, as I'm warning people, do not let this excitement cloud the fact that we still have a lot of work we have to do. Like, we're not going to win this no matter what. We're only going to win if we do the work. And I've seen this before where the excitement's happening, everyone thinks we're inevitable. And that's where you get got. And so I think if we were to lose, it'd be because of that. But I don't see that happening.
Got it. And have you spoken to, obviously right after Joe Biden dropped out, Vice President Harris was working the phones, her team was working the phones. Did they get in contact with you?
Her team did. I haven't spoken with the VP yet, but I've spoken with, Julie and different people from the campaign, folks who work for the VP, and I've gotten to know Governor Walz a lot over the last few weeks. So I was actually speaking with him before he was the pick. And so I feel very confident in the plan going forward.
So you are the youngest member of Congress. You were elected when you were 25, turned 26 a month later, but you're 27 now. Now, I think when people think about the working class, especially in sort of mass media, it's often depicted as, a guy in a hard hat, maybe building houses, or someone working at a fast food restaurant. I'm curious, when talking about younger generation, when you think about working class for Gen Z, what is the image that maybe is missed in sort of that stereotypical description?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you bringing this up. I mean, I think about a lot of my friends, a lot of my best friends, a lot of folks who grew up working class family. Their parents had to pay out of pocket as much as they could for their education, and then they took out student loans for the rest of it, because we've been told that once we graduate high school and we go and we get this 4-year degree, then we'll have a job in our field right after, and everything's happily ever after. And they graduate, and they haven't been able to find that work yet, and they're still working towards it, and maybe some of them work serving somewhere, or they're working at one of the theme parks or anything like that, still kind of chasing this. And I think that's the case for a lot of, I'm Gen Z, but I'm the oldest a Gen Zer can be. And so I think that a lot of young people who have graduated college or not, maybe they went straight into the workforce, that's what I think of. And, I live in a very hospitality rich area. We have, Disney and all the parks and everything. And it's a lot of young people working at these theme parks, working at these hotels, managing things. So that's how it looks like in Orlando and the people right around me.
And are there certain proposals that you think, let's say like Kamala Harris wins, what do you think should be the first big part of her agenda? Because of this rush process, she has not included many policy details, and we certainly don't know policy priorities in terms of there's usually a big first 100 days agenda. Is there a certain thing that you believe should be top of that list?
Well, I think we can get a sense of her priorities by the cadence, right, or what she rolls out first, right? And one of the first things she rolled out was on housing, and I think housing is the top issue for young people right now, especially when I'm out talking with people. We started one of the first congressional offices on a college campus, and so we have an office at UCF, University of Central Florida. It's one of the largest colleges in the country. The top three things that people come to us for in terms of constituent services are, yes, student loan forgiveness and needing help with different programs. Two, people are experiencing food insecurity that are students, so they need help with SNAP benefits. And the first one is housing. Housing. People who are renting right now off-campus student housing, or they're graduating and they just can't either afford to move in someone, or they can afford, but the barrier is so high for being able to rent in the first place that they can't. That's what happened to me, even after I was elected to Congress, because my credit was so bad during my campaign because I wasn't being paid as a candidate. I quit my job to run for Congress. I went into severe debt, and I couldn't move into an apartment here in D.C. because my credit was bad. Even though I had got up the money as I was working Uber to pay my bills, I'd worked up the money to move in, but I didn't even get the opportunity to do it. And so I think the vice president has put forth a good platform on this. Honestly, this has been a little bit of a criticism I've had for my parties. I don't think we have put forth if I say the gun violence agenda, we can think of a laundry list of policies. If I say an agenda on climate change, we can think of policies. But on housing, I feel like we haven't set forth that platform. What does it look like for a Democrat to be a champion on housing? Well, I think the vice president just did that last week and put forth what it means. Building homes, building 3 million new homes, rental homes, but also for home ownership. But also on top of that, ensuring that we crack down on all these horrible predatory practices that are keeping working people, working families, young people from even getting the opportunity to rent. And renting is oftentimes the precursor to owning. And owning a home is the largest asset a working person will have in their lifetime. And so we're stifling their ability to build that generational wealth now. And so I think that it's a top priority for the vice president, and that's really something that speaks to young people, especially the young people who don't care about politics, who don't want to hear from politicians. But when you ask them what they care about, they're going to bring up the economy, and they're going to bring up specifically housing.
You brought up college campuses. So as we saw last spring, there were many protests across college campuses about the Israel-Gaza war, specifically Israel's conduct of that war. It certainly is an energizing issue for young people. We are now heading back into the fall with college kids returning to campus right in the heat of the election season. I'm curious what you saw the reaction from Democrats last spring, and what would be your advice to them going into this fall?
Obviously, there were varying type of responses to it. And for people who don't know, I come from the movement world. I come from organizing. I was a national organizing director at March for Our Lives for 2 years and worked at the ACLU before that. And I've been tear gas, mace, arrested. I went to jail in the district I now represent during the Black Lives Matter uprising for nonviolent protest. And so that's where I come from. And I do think that it is important, and I think a big part of the reason why Democrats have been successful is because we are a big tent party, right? There is room for people, unless you're like a bigot, there's room for people to be a part of our party, a part of our coalition that's working for everyone, no matter who you are. And I think part of that is accepting when people are upset about something, when there's atrocities going on, which I would say that's what's going on, what's been going on, and people want to be vocal about it, you should let them be vocal and figure out ways you can bring people into your coalition through that. Because the thing that worried me about a lot of these protests, and during the protests in Orlando during Black Lives Matter, I wouldn't say it was a buzzkill, but a lot of the things I would tell the other organizers is we have a very important responsibility as the leaders of this movement in Orlando, because there's going to be so many kids, so many young people who've never done anything political in their life, who came out because they saw a video of George Floyd being lynched in broad daylight, and they don't know anything about politics, but they're there, and they're going to repeat the things we chant, and they're going to listen to the things we say and say, this is what it looks like to be in solidarity with black people in this country. This is what I need to believe in. This is what I need to do. And obviously, with any kind of protest movement, there's going to be bad actors. There's going to be varying opinions, people saying very different things. But when we're absent from those spaces, the void will easily be filled by voices that we might disagree with.
So Vice President Harris confronted some of these protests just a few weeks ago, and her response was essentially, if you want Donald Trump to win, just say that, and I'm speaking. Did you think that was the right tone, given what you just said?
A day later, the same thing happened with protests, and she took a little bit of a different tone. But I get what she's saying too, right? You know,
Were you glad she changed her tone?
I do think that the next time that it came up, I think she had a better approach in dealing with it. But I do want to completely validate her feeling in it, because, you know, she's running against someone who's you know, literally said that he's fine with Gaza being flattened, right? He's fine with all these different things. I think Kamala Harris provides an opinion that validates everybody in this situation, all the pain that we see from everybody, the real pain and plight from Palestinians, innocent people that are dying. I have constituents in my district that have lost 30, 40 family members. To the real history and plight of our Jewish brothers, sisters, and siblings, and what Israel represents, more than just a country or more than just a state, but like represents the existence of their people that have been through so much. And having leaders who understand that in their heart and are able to empathize with that, I think it's really important in this moment. And I think Kamala Harris is that person. And I've seen it. I have friends who are part of this movement in a big way, from my protest days and from the work I've done. And I've heard from them directly that they feel validated here. And I think, you know, the vice president's in a difficult position, right? She's a sitting vice president to a president. She also, I think, has taken a little bit of a different tone on this situation. And so we'll see how things go. But I think that we're going in a really good direction in bringing people into this coalition. We're all going to disagree on different issues. It doesn't mean we're not all Democrats at the end of the day.
Do you think it'd be helpful to get some of those voters that you're talking about, some of those young people, some of those people that got engaged by the movement, if she distanced herself a little bit from how the Biden administration has been handling the issue so far?
I don't think she needs to distance herself from this. I think the president, obviously it's a very difficult situation, and the president's the one that's been fighting for this ceasefire. But sometimes we lose the plot in social media and everything like that, and it gets difficult to come back from that. And I think that's part of the challenge that the president has had, and not him specifically, but just us in general. And I think what the vice president presents is a new face, a new person who's providing a new way of thinking about this and a new way of handling the coalition. And it gives us an opportunity, almost kind of like a reset, to reach back out to folks, and not just folks on pro-Israel side and Palestinian side, but I think most people in this country agree on this issue. I think oftentimes we hear from like the vocal kind of extremes on both ends, but I think most people are in the same place here, and I think that's the position that Kamala Harris has.
Great. And one last question for you. You're expected to speak on the stage this week. Can you give us a little bit of a preview of what you're going to talk about? If there's one thing you want to say, like people to come away from your speech, what will it be?
Of course, nothing's been announced, but if I were to speak at the DNC, I'd probably speak about the climate crisis and how it's not a distant threat, but it's here. And I'm experiencing it in Florida. My people are experiencing it, and we need to do something about it, and Kamala Harris will do something about it.
Well, Congressman, we are out of time. We went over time, but I don't think anyone here minded because it was a great conversation. So appreciate you coming, and thank you very much. Everyone, we have another event coming right now. We're going to do a quick furniture change, real quick, a little shift. But thank you so much for coming and for listening.
Thanks, everybody.
Good evening, everyone. So glad you're still with us. We're going to keep this show moving forward. I'm Eugene Scott. I'm a host for Axios Live. And we wanted to give a big shout out to the Progressive Policy Institute. They're one of our sponsors that made this event happen. So if you could put your hands together for them, that would be great. And without further ado, I'd love to welcome a couple folks from the Progressive Policy Institute or affiliated with the Institute on stage to talk a bit about the work that they are doing and giving a much more global perspective of what's happening right now related to the issue of working class voters. So right now I'm going to have Mike Tapp. He's a UK Member of Parliament for Dover and Deal. And Lucy Rigby, a UK Member of Parliament for Northampton North. Let's use this stair so we have no injuries. Thank you so much. Awesome. Thank you so much. Great. So let's start big picture. You all won. What does the recent Labour Party landslide in the UK foreshadow for the US this November?
Hey, Eugene. Well, I think some omens are very good. You guys have got yourselves a former state prosecutor, so like the Prime Minister in the UK. It's a very good start, I think. And we didn't know actually that we were going to go first. By the way, is what I should say. So the former Prime Minister in the UK had technically until January 25. When he could have called the election, but he went earlier, and as you probably saw, it didn't work out. It didn't work out entirely well for him. But look, I think the most important thing that the UK election foreshadows is that I think a centre-left party that talks relentlessly about the issues that matter to working people and communicates those well has the power to win back trust. Trust that's been lost quite recently, and to win. And as you saw in the UK context, to win big. And using the UK as the example, I think when I talk about those issues that matter to working people, in the recent election that we had in July, those issues, we needed to talk about the economy, and within that, managing the economy well and helping people with the cost of living crisis that they were experiencing. And the other issue, which was kind of a threshold issue, was national security. So unless we were trusted on the economy and national security, we weren't going to be heard on other things. We were trusted on those two things, and that gave us the space to be listened to on health, on crime, on immigration, on everything else.
Mike, can you dive into the strategy a bit about how you all were able to move the needle and get voters to actually turn out for you based on the issues that Lucy just mentioned that they cared a lot about?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for having us. It's a pleasure to be here for such a historic event. Yes. It really is. And look, we had a battle on our hands. We had the biggest defeat since the Second World War to overcome in a very short period. And we had a strategy, and that strategy was essentially winning from the centre ground and from the centre left. Okay. And you'll get a lot of noise from the far left and the far right, and they're louder than those in the centre. But you have to stick to that strategy. And the way that we approached this, and it took a number of years, was firstly cleaning up the Labour Party. We were plagued by anti-Semitism, and we had to be hard on that. And Keir Starmer, with his team, did a really good job of that. And then we moved on to ensuring that we highlighted the Conservative failures. And that was quite easy, because there were so many of them, and because people were suffering, and working class, hard-working families were really suffering from the cost of living crisis. And then we laid out our stall as to exactly what we will offer the British people. And it's so important to not ignore what hard-working people are saying to you. And in my seat in Dover and Deal, one of the top issues is immigration and insecure borders. And I didn't ignore them, and the party didn't ignore them, and that has led us to victory.
Awesome. So you're here at the convention surrounded by strategists and political leaders from around the world, and mostly around the country, obviously. But the world is eager to understand the key to your success and replicate it. What's your call to action to other leaders in the room?
That's a big question. I think, and I'm sure the same is true in the US as it is in the UK, that I genuinely believe that the centre-left has the best answers to the challenges that are facing working people in the UK, the US, and other countries too. I think the challenge is communicating those solutions in a way that resonates with people in the face of that kind of false simplicity that comes with populism. But I think the UK election is a great example of, if you do that, and as I said, if you relentlessly talk about the issues that matter to working people in a clear way, then you can win, and you can win big.
Are there particular issues that you're hearing discussed right now on the campaign on both sides of the aisle that are very reminiscent of some of the issues you all hear often from your constituents?
Absolutely, and housing is a big issue in the United Kingdom, and we've taken that on, and it is a case of reforming those planning laws to ensure that people can own houses and that the rental prices come down. And I've knocked on obviously thousands of doors, like I'm sure many of you guys will be over the next few months, and you're encountering people in their 40s living at home with their parents because they just can't afford to get on the ladder, and we have to cut through that red tape and bureaucracy and get the spades in the ground. And already we're seeing that from the Labour government starting to put that in place in just 5 weeks. So.
Is there a topic that you think has been of significant concern to your constituents, working people, that you don't hear people in the U.S. on Capitol Hill talking about enough?
I think certainly, as Mike said, we knocked on tens of thousands of doors in each of our constituencies, and indeed, Labour candidates were doing that across the country. I think the things that came up predominantly in Northampton's sort of, I should have said, it's a sort of slap bang in the middle of England, really is the heart of the country. It's a marginal seat, a battleground seat, and it tends to go with the government. So if the Conservatives win, then the Conservatives win Northampton North, and vice versa for Labour. So it really is it's moderate politics. What people were talking to me about during the election was the cost of living. That came up repeatedly. And then also public services. And that was about healthcare in particular. And it's about crime. I think, Mike, you had immigration was a big issue for you down in Dover.
And on immigration, I think it's really important that secure borders is fundamental to any nation state, and we mustn't ignore that. And it's dangerous to label people as racist if they are bringing up immigration, and ensure that we listen to people and that we act on that, but well and truly within our Labour and democratic values. It's not a case of taking the Trump approach, but we can meet them where they are and ensure that they are listened to.
So for those who are not deeply familiar with the politics of the UK, what do you think people from the outside looking in get wrong or misunderstand most about what it's like governing in the UK?
It's hard to say because I'm in it, I'm there. I think, one of the biggest challenges for any government is delivery, isn't it? And also, I think we've seen great successes with Bidenomics in the United States, and one of the big challenges is getting that to cut through to voters, for them to vote on it. And I think that's similar in the United Kingdom. We've got 5 years to fix a massive fiscal mess, but on top of that, we've got to make sure we are combating other issues that matter to people to ensure they vote. But I think delivery is going to be tough. And that's why in the United Kingdom, for example, I think we need really 10 years of national renewal to get to where we need to be. But we can be that big player on the international stage again, and I think we will be.
Lucy, what would you say the largest misunderstanding about politics, if you were talking to someone not familiar with it who's outside of the UK?
Well, I think Mike makes a really good point about, I think there is a point to be made about voter volatility, sort of increasing volatility. So if you look at the sort of history of recent UK elections, you can see there's less sort of tribal attachment to political parties in the way that there used to be. And that can mean that that there are big switches. Right. Big swings. Yeah. And so I think it would be a mistake for any political party in government to have any degree of complacency. And which leads me to Mike's point, which is it's all about delivery. And we now, as a Labour government in the UK, need to continue to communicate in the same way that we did during the election. But now we're communicating about the things that we're going to deliver. And we need quick delivery on the things that matter to working people, including the cost of living, including public services.
So lastly, we've got 24 hours in England, and the next president, maybe Trump, maybe Harris, is at your office and asking you to take them somewhere to eat. Where are they eating?
That's I
Just
can.
24 hours.
Yeah, no, I was enjoying that moment, actually, imagining that. So you're going to come to Northampton,
Okay.
obviously, with me in the UK. You're going to come to a great bar and cafe called Saints, which is not too far from our Premiership champion rugby, yes. Northampton Saints, yes. Right? We're the Premiership champions at the moment. So you're going to come with me to Saints, the bar run by a really great guy, fantastic entrepreneur, and you're going to enjoy some history of Northampton.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Lucy's normally right about everything, but this time you're wrong. They're going to come to Dover. Okay. Deal, actually, or Kingsdown, which is a village between the two, and there's a lovely pub on the beach, and they're going to have a pint, and they're going to watch the ship sail past.
I think pub on the beach is just one for me. Awesome. But I'm so glad both of you, Lucy and Mike, came to share your thoughts and ideas with us here, and we really appreciate it, and I hope we get to talk to you very soon.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. And we hope you all stay with us. We're just going to have a quick stage change break, but we'll be right back with you after that. Thanks.
Thanks, Eugene. Thank all of you for joining us this evening. I'm Nyla Boodoo. I host our Axios podcast, One Big Thing. And a sneak peek, if you'd like to be part of this week's show, tomorrow I'll be interviewing the head of the UAW, Sean Fain, right here at Axios House. So if you want to be part of that, please RSVP and join us tomorrow. Thank you so much for being with us this evening and this day for our first day of Axios House. And we're going to wrap things up with our final guest for this evening, Washington Congresswoman and Dee's Triple C Chair, Susan DelBene. Congresswoman, thank you for being here. Thank you for being here, Congresswoman.
Absolutely.
And welcome to Axios House.
It's great to be here.
So at Axios, we don't like to bury the lead, so I feel like we should just get straight to it. And let me just ask, are Democrats going to take the House back?
Absolutely.
By how many seats? Are you gonna...
You know, I have this pin on. We need 4 more seats to take back the majority in the House of Representatives. So obviously we want more, but we got to make sure we win for take back the gavels and make Hakeem Jeffries Speaker Hakeem Jeffries.
And what state do you think is going to be the state that we're going to be watching here?
Well, this is actually a great question because people don't realize that we have races all over the country. Sometimes people think of the Senate, there's a handful of races
Sure.
or swing districts, but we have incredible opportunities in California and New York and Iowa and Nebraska and Alabama. So huge opportunities all across the country. I'm very excited, but I think we have many opportunities to take back the House with great candidates who are running in these battleground districts.
Congresswoman, today we've been talking at Axios House about working class voters, and I wanted to start by talking about a district here in Illinois. As a former Illinois resident, I always watched and covered districts like Illinois 17th, which is out in the Quad Cities, and that's being very heavily targeted by both parties. What is your pitch to the Rockford voter who may have voted for Donald Trump in the last election, or both of the last election cycles?
Well, I think the first thing we always do is we listen. We listen to voters and ask them what their concerns are, what the challenges are that they face in their region, because that really informs the work that we need to do. And I think, when I first ran for Congress, I also ran in a purple district, in a swing district, and I was one of those folks, a frontliner in a tough re-election. And the most important thing for me was to hear from folks.
What did they say? Yeah.
Well, because sometimes you actually agree on things and you use different word and language. When I was first running, it was a lot of discussion about the Affordable Care Act. And I remember talking to a gentleman, he was a truck driver in a very rural part of my district. And we started talking about healthcare, and he was just like, Democrats. And then I said, well, tell me what it is that you want to see from healthcare. Do you think we should, make sure that we cover pre-existing conditions? And he's like, yes. And should we make sure kids stay on their parent? And he said, yes. And so we started talking, and all of a sudden I'm like, well, those are the things we're fighting for. And we had a great conversation. And because when you talk to people, you realize you agree on a lot more than you think. When it's kind of, you're on this team, you're on that team, you don't learn. And that's what I think the heart of our policy really comes from these battleground districts, where you learn, you try ideas out, you hear differing points of view, because I actually think hearing differing points of view makes you a better legislator. You learn and work through issues to put together the best policy for your entire district and for the entire region. And frankly, I think it's representative of the country. And that's why I think we have incredible opportunity in these battleground districts, because we have candidates who are listening to folks who are talking about what they need to do to help folks in their region. And so it becomes less about an individual party and much more about having someone who's truly representative of their district and coming to Washington, D.C. to fight for them.
That said, when we're talking about the presidential race, how worried are you about the prospect of a different type of appeal it is to a voter now that it's candidate Harris versus Joe Biden? I don't think it's too controversial to say that Scranton Joe definitely had like a different kind of appeal than Kamala Harris would.
But I do think when on the House side, they're listening to who is the House member, either the incumbent or the candidate running. I mean, if you think about the House, we have 435, districts across the country. We have each race they're running every 2 years. We've got folks running in pieces of states. So even in blue states or red states, there could be, more purple districts in there that are part of the key of the majority in the House. And they're talking about the issues that matter there. People want governance to work. If there's one thing I hear across the country as I travel, folks want folks working to solve problems for them. They want governance to work, and they want to hear from folks what they're going to do to actually govern and make a difference in their lives. That's what makes the difference. Yes, the top of the ticket is important. There's huge enthusiasm for Vice President Harris. You're going to see that here. We've seen it already. But when we're talking about members of Congress running, it's very much, what are you going to do for my family in our region to make a difference?
Do you think, given that enthusiasm, you would like to see, how much are you hoping you're going to get Tim Walz or Kamala Harris to campaign specifically for some of these competitive House races? And I'm thinking, let's just talk about here in the Midwest. Do you feel like you are going to get them in states that may not be as much battleground states?
Well, first of all, our candidates are running their campaigns. Some of them will want folks to come out. Some of them won't. Some of them will want to make sure they're focused on local issues. We have folks running in states that are not going to be battleground district or battleground states for the presidential election, but might be important from a House perspective. So,
Right, so that's what I was wondering. For those, do you feel like if you're not going to get them, like who would be your ideal as DCCC? Like who would you like to see the surrogates showing up to campaign on
Well,
these.
but it's different. And I'm not avoiding your question, actually. It's different depending on the district and who you ask. There are different folks that people want to bring in, given what's critical in their district, given the demographics of their district and the issues of the district. So I actually, as D-Trip chair, support our folks by asking them, tell me who you want to see. Tell me who the folks are that you think are going to be important messengers in your district, and we'll kind of work to help get those people to come. But frankly, it can be very different depending on who you ask across the country. And that's actually a great thing, because it really highlights that we have independent, results-oriented candidates and incumbents running for re-election all across the country, as opposed to Republicans that we're running against who really have gotten to a point where if you have any differing point of view, you're kicked out of the party, and it's all about blind loyalty to Donald Trump. And so I do think that's one of the huge things that is an advantage for us, is our ability to make sure we have folks who are going to really run and fight for their districts, who are listening, and whose focus is on the needs of their communities, and they're willing to speak up even if it may be different than what other folks they hear across the country are talking about.
So given that it is a Big Ten, as you said, there might be some people who don't necessarily want the presidential candidates in their district. Now that we have seen the top of the ticket change, has that changed? Are you hearing from more candidates saying we want them?
It's changed a little bit. I think what we've seen in the biggest difference has been on the ground with enthusiasm and energy, folks turning out to volunteer, to knock on doors. We've seen increases in fundraising for folks across the country and for the DCCC. All of that because folks are very, very excited, engaged, and know how important not only it is to elect Vice President Harris and Governor Walz to the top of the ticket, but also how important it is that we take back the majority in the House of Representatives. To truly get things done, we need a Congress that is going to be functional, that's going to focus on the work of the people, and we have that opportunity. But right now, we've got chaos, dysfunction, and extremism in the House of Representatives. You've all seen it from day one with 15 rounds of speaker elections, threats of shutdowns, and even more recently, we got sent home early in July because Republicans couldn't agree with Republicans. Those are the things that drive people at home crazy. They are like, we need you to get work done that can make a difference for us. Go work, make that happen. And that's a huge priority for us.
And it sounds like those are the things that you are expecting Democratic candidates to be verbalizing to local voters as well.
Right. They're absolutely
would you say that's sort of one of the main message points?
The main message points are, as I said earlier, people want to see governance work. So responsible governance versus extremism. They want folks who are focused on growing and supporting the middle class versus tax cuts for the wealthy and well-connected. They want folks who are going to be there to address the needs of their communities and who are going to govern. And that's a huge contrast. This election really is about contrast. They also want folks who are going to stand up for their rights and their freedoms and our democracy. And so that's a key point of this election, too. And people feel that everywhere. Standing up for reproductive freedom, standing up for voting rights. These are also key issues across the country.
Right. I was going to ask you about reproductive rights. Joe Biden had a hard time saying the word abortion. Kamala Harris has visited abortion clinics. I'm thinking about earlier in the day, Representative DeLoria was talking about women and female voters. What are you seeing? And obviously, reproductive rights is not just a female voting issue, but what are you seeing among constituents around organizing around that?
It has been powerful all across the country since the Dobbs decision. We have seen voters turn out in special election after special election since November of 2022 to stand up for reproductive freedom. And remember, that's in states like Kansas and Ohio, in Virginia, in the state assembly, in Wisconsin, where they had a Supreme Court race. Even in Alabama, after their state Supreme Court made the decision on IVF, you saw a state legislative seat swing from red to blue by about 30 points. We've seen strong turnout because this is an incredibly important issue. We know for women it is a just a flat out red line issue. They're not going to vote for anyone who doesn't support reproductive freedom. And abortion's going to be on the ballot in many swing states across the country too. So when we see the enthusiasm that we have seen all throughout this cycle, there's no doubt we're going to continue to see that. This is about basic health care. We've seen women being denied health care. We've seen doctors talk about not being able to do their jobs in certain states, and Republicans want to put in place a nationwide abortion ban. So incredibly clear, a critical issue, and we've already seen the impact across the country, and we're going to see it in November too.
Tomorrow, your colleague, Representative Veronica Escobar, is going to be here. And I wanted to ask you about the border. We were just talking about border issues within the UK. Given how much of a topic this has been nationally here in the U.S., do you see that the message from Democrats would be different in a border state versus maybe here in the Midwest?
I actually think it's really important that folks take this issue straight on and talk about how important it is and the relevance in their districts. My good example would be New York 3. We had a special election in February to take back New York 3. Tom Suozzi won. That was got a lot of national attention. But one of the issues in New York was the migrant crisis. And Republicans brought it up over and over again, and Tom Suozzi addressed it head on. He called Republicans out for walking away from a bipartisan deal that they helped negotiate, but Donald Trump told them don't vote for it, so they all voted against it. And Tom talked about what he would do to help address the issue for his community. In fact, I think he's speaking on the floor here in a couple days. And that was critical. Voters voted for him because he actually talked about what he would do, what his policies would be. He took it head on. He did not avoid the issue. And Republicans had no solutions. They just wanted to see things broken and point fingers. But they weren't willing to put any policy together. They are, in terms of blind loyalty to Donald Trump, this was literally Donald Trump saying, don't vote for it. A policy solution, which was bipartisan, fell apart for that simple reason.
In your home state, I'm thinking of the 3rd Congressional District. In the past cycle, Democrats won by less than 1 percentage point. I think it was 2,629 votes. And with all, I think, the national attention and conversation on battleground states, and you hear people saying this election is going to be determined, the presidential election is going to be determined in a handful of states. As DCCC chair, how do you get the message out to people that their individual vote in their state and in their district can be very important?
Well, as a DCCC chair from the great state of Washington, I might talk about this particular race a lot to highlight to folks how critically important it is, because the 3rd District in Southwest Washington is one of 5 districts we have across the whole country that Donald Trump won in 2020, but that a Democrat is actually representing that seat. Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez in Washington is one of them. Mary Peltola in Alaska, Jared Golden in Maine, Marcy Kaptur in Ohio, Matt Cartwright in Pennsylvania, all representing districts that Trump won. But they are strong, independent voices for their district. People trust them and vote for them. Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez in Washington's 3rd District is running against one of the most extreme MAGA Republicans out there. And that's saying a lot, because we've got some folks who are very extreme. He might put a new point on the map in terms of extreme, supporting white nationalism. This was the same person she ran against last time. And she has been a strong, strong voice for her community. She has been an independent voice for her community. And they're attacking her up on the air. We are making sure that she has the resources to continue to get out the message and really tell the work that she's done. And I think she's doing a great job. And so, but this is important to take back the majority. We need to keep the seats we have, and we need to pick up 4 more. But she's doing a great job. I think folks have incredible respect for her, frankly, on both sides of the aisle. And she's doing a great job. I'm excited for her to be coming back to Congress, next Congress.
At Axios, we like to end on one fun thing. So I wanted to ask you, we were talking backstage about your former career as a high school football referee, and I just wanted to ask what your take was. I don't know how much you were watching the Olympics, but on the gymnast, the bronze medal situation? Like, as a referee, what are your thoughts?
Well, very different because, referee versus the judging system. I don't understand the judging
fair
system in gymnastics. But I will say, as a high school referee, it was probably one of my the best training I could get for Congress. You have to.
How's that?
You make a decision. You get the information you can. You make a decision based on the information you have. Probably no matter what you do, someone's mad at you. But really, the most important thing you want to do is make sure that the game is less about what happens from a referee call and more about the two teams playing. But I was a football fan. It was a great experience. But it definitely is you're on the spot all the time, and very, very important. So I know they always need more referees, especially for high school and sports for young people across the country.
I feel like you and Governor Walz could probably do a good campaign on that.
So whatever your sport is, go out there and help.
Well, Congresswoman Delveni, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
A reminder to our audience, we would love for you to return tomorrow for Axios House for part 2 of these conversations. We'll be hosting conversations with Congressman Jim Clyburn, Senator Gary Peters, and as I mentioned, tomorrow we'll also host interviews with UAW President Sean Fain, Valerie Jarrett, Congressman Ruben Gallego, and New York Governor Kathy Hochul will also be here. So to check out the whole lineup, just go to axios.com/events. Please stick around, enjoy a drink or two while we catch DNC primetime programming. Of course, there are Chicago-style hot dogs in the corner, so appropriate. Thanks for being here.